The Ottoman Empire is one of the strongest empires that controlled the world. At its peak, the empire controlled over 5.2 million square kilometers, encompassing parts of southeastern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, even from the Balkans to the gates of Vienna to the borders of Persia and the Arabian Peninsula. The empire lasted over 600 years. To understand how the empire collapsed, we need to go back to its origin and understand how the empire rose in the first place. In the late 13th century, the Byzantine Empire was weak and on the brink of destruction because they had lost many battles and were losing land and political power. Since this split Christianity into Catholicism and Orthodoxy, this weakens Byzantine's ability to get Western European support. But inside Anatolia, there was a small Turkic tribe led by a man named Osman I. Osman expanded his lands by fighting Byzantine frontier towns. His followers were a mix of Turkish warriors, including Islamic holy fighters and local converts. His leadership and early conquests laid the foundations of the Ottoman dynasty, but he wasn't the only tribe in Anatolia looking for power. The once powerful Seljuk Turks who had ruled much of Anatolia were collapsing after the Mongols' invasion. Many small Turkic principalities emerged in the chaos, all of whom fought each other to fill the power vacuum left by both the Seljuks and the Byzantines. Around 1299, Osman declared independence from the Seljuks. Historians often mark this as the birthplace of the Ottoman state. Osman's son, Orhan, turned the Ottomans into a regional power, and in 1326 they captured a major city named Bursa. This was the Ottomans' first major city and became their capital. Bursa's wealth gave the Ottomans economic strength and prestige. Orhan created the first Ottoman standing army, which included saved soldiers. This made the Ottomans more organized than their rivals. Around 1352, after a devastating earthquake in Thrace, the Ottomans seized Gallipoli, their first foothold in Europe. This was a game changer. It opened the way for Ottoman expansion into the Balkans. After his death in 1362, Orhan's son Murad had pushed Ottoman expansion further, and in 1369 he made Idran the new capital, strategically located for Balkan campaigns. He conquered large parts of Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Serbia. Many Balkan lords became his vassals, paying tribute to the Ottomans. An important battle during this time was the Battle of Kosovo. It was a defining clash between the Ottomans and a coalition of Balkan states. The Ottomans won, securing dominance in the Balkans. Murad I was assassinated on the battlefield, becoming the first Ottoman Sultan to die in combat. This established Ottoman dominance in the Balkans, setting the stage for centuries of rule. The next Sultan would be Bayezid I, which had the nickname the Thunderbolt, which came from his expansion, earning his nickname for the speed of his campaigns. He advanced into Hungary and Greece, defeated a Crusader army at the Battle of Necropolis in 1396, cementing Ottoman power in Europe. Also during this time was one of the first attempts in capturing Constantinople. The first Ottoman siege of Constantinople was in the same year. Bayezid nearly captured the Byzantine capital surrounding the city with fortifications, but the siege eventually broke. Bayezid's reign ended in disaster when he was defeated and captured by Timur at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. The empire briefly fractured as his sons fought for power. One of them came out on top after defeating his brother, Mehmed I. He reunited the empire and restored stability and rebuilt the Ottoman administration. His reign was focused less on conquest and more on consolidation. Then came his successor, which was Mehmed II, nicknamed the Conqueror, one of the most famous Ottoman sultan in history, because in 1453 was the fall of Constantinople. Mehmed II used massive cannons and a huge army to finally conquer Constantinople. After the battle, the city was basically in ruins, ending the Byzantine Empire, which had lasted over 1,000 years. He renamed it to Istanbul and made it the new capital. Not long after, in 1492, the New World was discovered by Christopher Columbus. The Ottomans indirectly caused European powers to find a new way to reach Asia. Meanwhile, the Ottomans kept expanding for the next 150 years. Bayezid II consolidated gains and avoided reckless war. Selim I expanded into the Middle East, defeating the Mamluks of Egypt. He brought the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control, and the sultans claimed the title of Caliph, meaning leader of the Muslim world. The next sultan that rose to power was Selim the Magnificent. It was the empire's golden age. He expanded into Hungary, Iraq, North Africa, and advanced all the way to the gates of Vienna. He oversaw cultural and legal achievements too. After conquering much of Hungary, after 1526, the Ottomans marched toward Vienna. It seemed the Ottomans were unstoppable, and were going to push towards Western Europe, but something came in their way. In September 1529, Selim laid siege to Vienna. His army was enormous, estimated around 100,000 men, but heavy rain slowed them down. Supplies were stretched thin. The Ottomans lacked the large artillery needed to breach Vienna's strong walls. After about 3 weeks, the Ottomans withdrew. This was the high water mark of Ottoman expansion in Europe. While after this battle they still remained strong, they never pushed much further into Central Europe. But this wouldn't be the last time the Ottomans tried to take Vienna. Once more, they tried to again a century later under Grand Vizier Kafar Mustafa Pasha. He would be fighting against a coalition of Christian forces led by King Jan Sobieski of Poland. The Habsburgs and the Roman Empire would make a pact called the Holy League to stop the advancing Ottomans from taking Vienna. By summer 1683, the Ottomans had surrounded Vienna with 150,000 troops. The city was being defended by just around 20,000 troops, mostly Austrians and some German allies, led by Count Ernest Rudiger von Stauffenberg. For almost 2 months, the defenders suffered from starvation, disease, and constant bombardment. Ottoman engineers dug tunnels under the walls and set off explosive mines to create breaches. But the defenders countered by digging countermines, fighting underground battles in the dark. Civilians inside the city endured terrible conditions with food running out and morale collapsing. By early September, parts of the wall were collapsing. If relief didn't come soon, the city would most definitely fall. A coalition of Christian forces were slowly gathering to rescue Vienna under King John III Sobieski. And with the help of the Holy Roman Empire under Charles of Lorraine, small contingents from Vienna's and Papal States, in total around 70 to 80,000 men, marched toward Vienna. On September 11, 1683, they arrived in the hills of the Vienna woods, overlooking the besieged city. At 5 p.m. on the same day, John Sobieski launched the largest cavalry charge in history. Around 18,000 cavalrymen, including the elite Polish winged hussars, charged downhill in 4 lines. The charge smashed into the exhausted Ottoman lines, breaking them completely. Mustafa Pasha's forces collapsed and retreated in chaos. Vienna was saved at the very last moment. The Ottomans suffered devastating losses, leaving behind camps, artillery, and supplies in the retreat. Mustafa Pasha was later executed by the Sultan for his failure. This battle was very important because it stopped the Ottomans from pushing further into Europe. This would be at the height of their empire. After this battle, they would slowly be on a gradual decline in terms of world power and influence. They would never fight again a Western power until World War I. But even before, during the reign of Sultan the Magnificent, the empire had already started showing cracks. Later sultans were often less capable or uninterested in governance, spending more time in the palace than on campaigns. Real power shifted to the Grand Vizier, the Janissary court, and the powerful court factions. Corruption and intrigue became common, with officials buying and selling positions. The loss at the Vienna made the weakness impossible to ignore. Its military system was outdated, its bureaucracy was bloated and insufficient, its economy was struggling, especially compared to rapidly modernizing Europe. But for the Ottomans, it was only going to get worse. The Ottomans lost battle after battle due to the corrupt military hierarchy, and the lack of modern military tactics caused them to lose part of their empire. Hungary, Transylvania, and parts of the Balkans were gradually taken back. Their armies, once feared, were now on the defensive. The long war ended with the Treaty of Korlowitz, which was a humiliating loss for them. This was one of the most important treaties in Ottoman history, because it marked the first time the empire formally ceded large territories to European powers. The Habsburgs gained Hungary and Transylvania. Venice took parts of Greece and Dalmatia. Poland recovered Polodia. These defeats led to political instability inside the empire. Confidence in the Sultan's leadership declined. Revolts and unrest broke out in parts of the empire. The Janissaries, the elite soldiers of the empire, became increasingly undisciplined and politically powerful, interfering in state affairs and even at times trying to overthrow the sultans instead of training. The central authority of the Ottoman state, which had once been so strong, began to erode. Economically, the empire was also struggling. Since the Ottomans controlled the Middle East, and with it the trade routes that led to places like India and China, they had the revenue coming from people buying goods from the Far East, and they also had a tax from merchants who wanted to travel and sell goods who had to cross their territory. But during the 17th century, trade routes shifted to favor the Atlantic world, instead of Ottoman-controlled routes. The Ottoman economy couldn't keep up with Europe's industrial and financial revolutions. Tax collection and provenance administration became more corrupt and insufficient. The empire was now playing catch-up with Europe instead of leading it. After 1699, the Ottoman Empire was no longer expanding. It was just trying to survive. There was still some hope, because during the reign of Sultan Ahmed III, he tried to modernize Istanbul's administration and architecture. He introduced the first printing press in the Islamic world in 1727. This caused more Western art, gardens, and infrastructure, which would influence Ottoman culture. In 1730, a Janissary-led rebellion by Patrona Halil overthrew Ahmed III, ending this period called the Tulip, and killing many reformers. Right after the rebellion, the empire was plunged back into wars, mostly against Russia, Austria, and Persia. The Russo-Turkish War became a recurring nightmare. Russia under Catherine the Great wanted access to the Black Sea and the influence in the Balkans. directly threatening Ottoman lands. The Ottomans lost major battles in the Balkans, Crimea, and the Caucasus. It ended with the Treaty of Karnaca in 1774. The Ottomans lost Crimea, and Russia gained the right to protect Orthodox Christians in the empire, a clause that would later justify future interventions. The treaty gave Russia naval access to the Black Sea, making it a new power in southeastern Europe. By the late 1700s, the empire was still large. It stretched from North Africa to Arabia and the Balkans, but it was politically unstable. An army was outdated. Its bureaucracy was corrupt. Economy lagged far behind the Europeans' industrial power. The European diplomats began calling it the, quote, sick man of Europe. Realizing the empire would collapse if nothing changed, some sultans and statesmen began major reform efforts, one of them being Sultan Selim III. He tried to modernize the army with European-style methods. He also tried to reform taxation and administration. But the Janissaries revolted and killed him in 1807. They feared losing their privileges. Another sultan by the name of Mahmud II survived by continuously rebuilding control. Finally, in 1826, he finally abolished the Janissaries in a bloody massacre. Then he began modernizing everything: the military, schools, dress, and administration. But with all these reforms and solutions, it did little to help the Ottoman situation. Even as reforms advanced, the empire kept losing land. Greece rebelled and won independence in the 1820s. Also, Egypt, under Muhammad Ali Pasha, began a semi-independent power. Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria began nationalist uprisings. European powers like Britain, France, and Russia interfered constantly, each of them trying to control Ottoman territories. By the late 1800s, the empire was a patchwork of semi-independent states, barely held together by diplomacy. And yet, there was another war in 1878 with Russia. The Ottomans lost almost all the European territories, except the Balkans and Istanbul. This was the situation that Mehmed VI was born into, who would later become the last sultan of the Ottoman Empire. He was born in 1861 in the Dolmabahce Palace, the son of Prince Abdul Majid Fendi, who was the brother of Sultan Abdul Aziz. His mother, Gulasti Kendi, was of a Caucasian origin. She died when Mehmed was only 4, so he was raised by his uncle's consort. Within the palace, from an early age, he lived a quiet, secluded life. Unlike earlier princes, he wasn't trained for active rule, because by then the Ottoman succession had become uncertain and crowded. He received a traditional Ottoman education, which meant religion, Persian, Arabic, calligraphy, literature, and some military instruction. But he was not considered particularly charismatic or strong-willed. Throughout his youth, he was overshadowed by his older relatives who ruled before him, such as Abdulaziz, Murad V, Abdul Hamid II, and Mehmed V. During Sultan Abdul Hamid II's reign, Mehmed was kept under close watch. Abdul Hamid was suspicious of all possible rivals. After the Young Turk Revolution in 1908 restored the constitution and deposed Abdul Hamid II, fifth became sultan, and Mehmed became next in line to be in the throne. During this time, he lived a life of relative luxury, but little political power, focusing on poetry, religion, and palace life. He often represented the Ottoman family at ceremonial events, such as funerals. But in 1914, the Ottomans would try one last time to save their dying empire. The Ottomans would join the Central Powers in 1914 for several reasons. The empire had lost almost all of its European lands in the Balkan Wars and felt threatened by Britain, France, and Russia. The Ottoman government believed only Germany could help them resist further territorial losses. The German Empire had invested heavily in Ottoman infrastructure, such as the Berlin-Baghdad Railway, and trained the Ottoman army. Enver Pasha admired German efficiency and military strength. Ottoman leaders dreamed of regaining lands lost to Russia and Britain. They saw wars such as for national revival. But the event that would bring them into the war was when 2 German warships entered the Dardanelles in August 1914, evading the British fleet. The Ottomans purchased them, but they remained under German command. On October 29th, these ships bombarded Russian ports in the Black Sea. Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire 2 days later, and Britain and France soon followed. The act officially brought the Ottomans into World War I, largely engineered by Enver Pasha, who was a military commander at the time, and not the Sultan. In July 1918, his half-brother Sultan Mehmed V died, and Mehmed VI ascended the throne. He became Sultan in the final months of World War I, at a time when the empire was basically done. His reign began under desperate conditions. The Ottoman Empire was defeated. The Allies were occupying large parts of the empire. The public was demoralized and the economy was ruined. Mehmed VI was deeply religious and conservative, but he lacked the strong leadership skills needed to confront the crisis. On October 3rd, 1918, the Armistice of Mudros was signed, ending Ottoman participation in the war. British, French, Italian, and Greek forces occupied strategic cities, including Istanbul. Mehmed VI hoped to preserve the dynasty by cooperating with the Allies rather than resisting them. He appointed moderate governments, believing that the obedience might save the Ottoman throne. Meanwhile, a new force was rising in Anatolia, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, and the Turkish national movement. In 1919, Greek troops landed at Izmir with Allied approval, a humiliation that triggered national-wide outrage. Mustafa Kemal, a former Ottoman general, began organizing resistance. Mehmed VI's position was complicated. He feared that Kemal's movement would destroy the monarchy and provoke Allied punishment. Under pressure from the British, he declared that the nationalist rebels and issued fatwas against them. He supported the Istanbul's puppet government, which condemned the nationalists. In August 1920, the Ottoman government signed the Treaty of Sevres, which partitioned the empire. Greece got most of the western Anatolia, including Izmir. France and Italy got zones of influence in southern Anatolia. Britain took Iraq and Palestine under mandate. Armenia and Kurdistan were promised independence. The treaty essentially destroyed Ottoman sovereignty. The Turkish nationalists in Ankara rejected it entirely and declared their own government. The nationalists under Mustafa Kemal fought Greek, French, and Armenian forces and gradually liberated Anatolia. The Allies could not suppress the movement. By 1922, the nationalist army had defeated the Greeks and re-entered Izmir and Ankara. The Grand National Assembly voted to abolish the Sultanate on November 1st, 1922. Mehmed VI, isolated in Istanbul under British protection, realized his power was gone. On November 17, 1922, Mehmed VI fled Istanbul abroad, the British ship HMS Malaya, seeking asylum. It was a tragic scene. The last Ottoman Sultan leaving the imperial city his ancestors had ruled for nearly 500 years. He first went to Malta, then settled in San Remo, Italy. In exile, Mehmed VI lived quietly with a small entourage cut off from his vast former empire. He tried to claim that he was still the rightful caliph of all Muslims, but in 1924 the Turkish Republic under Ataturk abolished the caliphate, ending that title. His financial situation dithered. The new Turkish Republic confiscated Ottoman property and wealth. He lived his final years in poverty and illness, writing letters and poetry reflecting nostalgia and sorrow for his lost empire. Mehmed VI died on May 16, 1926, aged 65, in Italy. Because the new Turkish Republic refused to allow his burial in Istanbul, his remains were taken to Syria and buried in the Sultan Selim First Mosque in Damascus, besides his great ancestors who had once conquered those lands. His reign symbolized the end of an old world, the Ottoman Caliphate, and the birth of modern Turkey. If you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching and listening, and let me know what you think in the comments.